More than 8,000 abortions were reported in 2023, a 13% increase from the previous year. The same year, the state passed the 6-week heartbeat bill. Well, since then, a proposed bill would ban all abortions in South Carolina with a few exceptions. Joining us is one of the sponsors of the bill, State Representative Jordan Pace, who represents District 117 in Berkeley County. It's good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So how does this bill differ from the 6-week heartbeat bill, and why was it brought to the floor?
Yeah, so the 6-week is it's a good starting point, and I think it moved the ball down the field, so to speak, with a football analogy. But what we saw after the bill was passed and enacted was the folks that I know that go down to the abortion centers and pray for people and try to give them options other than to end the life of their baby. They were seeing the same amount of traffic, whether cars and people, as before the bill was passed.
Really?
And doing a little bit more research, nowhere up until very, very recently in Texas, there hadn't been any arrests, any prosecution, nothing of anything in any state that has passed a similar bill to the 6-week situation. So essentially the problem is it's not being enforced either because it can't or isn't. That's the kind of the question.
So are you saying that despite the fact that the 6-week heartbeat bill was passed into law, that all these abortion clinics were on pace to administer the same number of abortions as previously?
So it has gone down a little bit because one of the big upticks in 23 was from out-of-state folks. They were coming here because Georgia and North Carolina and the surrounding states had lowered the number of weeks. So South Carolina was for a time a destination state for abortion. Okay. So it has clicked down a little bit in the facilities, but what's gone up is the at-home, taking the pills, which are infinitely more dangerous, frankly, for the women.
These would be considered chemical abortions?
Correct. And a lot of times they get them.
This is not the same as a Plan B, is it?
No, it's different.
This is totally different.
Yeah, Plan B is something you get over the counter immediately after things happen. The mifepristone, and then there's another one that starts with an M as well. That's what folks are getting in the mail with no doctor supervision, things like that, and it's the stats out of Europe say 1 in 4 women who take the pills wind up in the hospital, and for some reason or another.
It can make you very sick.
It can make you very sick. It could, if there was 2 examples last year during the presidential election that the Harris campaign used, the lady in Georgia and the lady in Texas who passed away. Right. Well, they died of sepsis because a piece of their baby didn't get fully out from taking the pills, and they didn't have any doctor supervision.
So what do you hope to achieve with this new bill?
Yeah, primarily one's to save lives, and both obviously the babies, but also the mothers. Because these pills that folks are getting, frankly, illegally from overseas and just through the mail, put their own lives at risk. The FDA doesn't keep stats of this, of these pills, but they do in Europe. And in the UK, that's where the 1 in 4 stat came from. And something like 1 in 16 women who take these pills wind up permanently maimed or die. Right.
So this bill essentially would prevent any abortions from taking place in the state of South Carolina, with a few exceptions.
Correct.
And what are those exceptions?
So the exceptions would be the life of the mother, or essentially permanent disability of the mother. So it would be up to the doctors to say, when that is. The doctors I've spoken to have said there's that late in a pregnancy, once you get to that 3rd term where something's gone awry, the safest thing to do is not to abort. It's just to have the child early. I mean, we have technology now where kids as young as 20 weeks old have survived and have lived perfectly healthy lives so far. Right. So it's never the safer option to have an abortion. It's always safer just to have the baby early.
So we've heard anecdotally some pregnancies that were determined unviable where women were not given the option to have the abortion here in South Carolina, but had to fly out of state, had to travel out of state, which was a very isolating experience. Sure. So how would that change the landscape? Would these same women, under those similar circumstances, be able to have alternatives here in South Carolina?
Not to have an abortion. But what is in place in South Carolina is we've streamlined a lot of the adoption protocols and timeframes for domestic adoption. We've also been a huge increase on an individual level and then even on a government level for pregnancy centers, resource centers, that provide not just physical resources, but counseling and job placement. There's one here in North Charleston that me and my wife contribute to that do amazing work to provide those alternatives, whether they want to keep the baby or put the baby up for adoption, which many make that choice.
With just a few seconds left, because I do want to make sure that we do touch on the fact that there should be resources in place, especially for those who are either too young or don't have the resources to raise that child, to know that there is an alternative.
Right.
So, and that's where I think the country as a whole has lacked the community aspect of gathering around these women who need every last bit of support in order to maintain that pregnancy to its natural completion for that child to be born.
Right.
And I think that's where the country has let a lot of women down.
Yeah, and that's where these pregnancy centers really come in across the state and really across the country. One of my colleagues, Sarita Esgerton, she's a freshman from Spartanburg. She's been a volunteer for 20 years and had a personal story. I don't want to tell her story for her, but the work that's being done there, not just facilitating, like saving the lives of these babies, but interdicting when girls are being trafficked.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Whether it's from across the border or internally, like that's a place where they can be safe and where they can get rescued.
Okay. What is the next step for this bill?
We're hoping to get a hearing. It had a lengthy hearing with no action a few months ago. Unfortunately, the Republican caucus, which I'm not currently a member of, there's 15 or 16 of us that aren't, has said that they don't want to take up any pro-life bills this year, but there is a large faction of us Republicans that do. Because we want to save not only the lives of these babies, but the women too.
All right. Well, Representative Pace, thank you so much for joining us on this. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
We're back after this.